Moral development. Let's take a look at a classic study that preceded Piaget's idea, and of course, preceded Lawrence Kober's idea. So it was studied by Hawthorne in May 1920. It's early, okay? It's early, but it's a classic study. Now, so here, educators believe that character, citizenship, virtues like truthfulness, honesty, and uprightness of character, they were significant goals for schooling. However, psychologists, they believe, no, morality could not be taught or instilled, right, in the students, right? So there are and if you look at our educational system, look at all our curricula in high school or even in primary school, we don't have a course on morality. Is that right? Most of the time, morality is kind of indirectly mentioned in English, okay? In English, like reading storybooks, that type of thing. All right. So Hawthorne and May, they showed repeatedly that formal character instruction had no effect. Had no effect. The correlation between, say, virtual training and actual behavior is zero. There's no relationship whatsoever. Right? Now, moral behavior seems inconsistent and unpredictable. They found essentially no consistent moral behavior in the same person from one situation to another based on character education. That is to say, people who cheat in one situation may or may not cheat in the next situation. So in general, moral behavior seems unpredictable. Unpredictable. Now, the third finding, there is no relationship between what people said about morality and the way these same people acted in the study. So the conclusion is that people who express great disapproval of cheating or stealing or pornography actually steal and cheat and watch pornography as much as anyone else. So that is not good for us, for a human being. All right. They also concluded the following: the risk of detection is the single most important factor in deterring cheating. So according to them, it was meaningless to divide people into simple categories and label them as either honest or dishonest. Why? Because there is an entire spectrum of character traits. Spectrum, like two polar opposite ends or two polar opposite extremes. Okay, let's say the spectrum spans the entire world: honesty, dishonesty, altruism, okay, selfishness, self-control, impulsiveness, things like this. Okay? There is a full spectrum. Okay, so the conclusion is that moral behavior is essentially defined by situational factors, including expediency, that is to say, doing what is convenient rather than what is right. All right. Now, so this one is a classic study, okay? 1920. Take a look at what Piaget. Yeah, Piaget is what is the is an important figure, one of the most important figures behind what morality in children. Okay, so let's take a look at Piaget. So because moral development appears to be linked to cognitive development, so similar invariant or sequential stages of development have been proposed. Then one in his classic work, Piaget, his book 1932, The Moral Judgment of the Child. Piaget, he was among the first to study the changes in levels of moral reasoning that accompany changes in cognitive development, basically using a lot of about 5 to 13 years old as his subject. Remember, Piaget relied on clinical observation to do his study. So Piaget began with the assumption that a sense of justice and number 2, respect for the social order are 2 central elements in mature morality. He claimed that there are 2 childhood moralities. Okay? There are 2. One of adult restraint, and the other one of mutual respect. Okay, so these he termed one heteronomous morality, subject to the rules imposed by others, and autonomous morality, subject to the rules imposed by self. So this is self-generated. This one is imposed by others. Okay, all right. In young children, the heteronomous stage, the focus is on the immediate, right before their eyes. The children's action depend on whether they get caught or because of the severity of the punishment. Okay? Little understanding is given to the intentionality of the action. So younger children seem to be rule-oriented and need a rule for every contingency. Right? Now, on the other hand, here, adult restraint. Adult restraint is in general the heteronomous morality of children under 9. Okay? Now remember, under 9, that is coincide with more or less with Piaget's concrete operational. So they treat rules as very important and cannot be changed. Rules are fixed. These children regard moral rules as sacred and inviolable, cannot be changed. But as children overcome what we call that egocentrism and develop the cognitive abilities, that is the formal operation necessary to put themselves in the place of others. Remember empathy. Empathy in formal operation. Children begin to have the concept of perspectivistic thought, at the beginning of empathy. Okay, they begin to understand concepts such as fairness and reciprocity that underlying golden rule, the autonomous morality. But here, children do not become truly moral individuals capable of guiding their own behavior by a set of stable ethical principles until they enter the concrete operational period. Some during the elementary grades, rules move from adult restraint to become the product of lawful convention and mutual respect among peers. Right? So that Piaget's finding. Let's take a look at something very interesting, moral realism. For young children, rules simply exist. Okay? So Piaget called this state, this is a state of moral realism. Now, let me expand on this a little bit. At this stage, the child of about 5 or 6 years old believes that rules about conduct or rules about how to play a game are absolute and cannot be changed. If a rule is broken, you break the rule. Okay? If the rule is broken, the child believes that the punishment should be determined by how much damage is done, not by the intention of the child or by other circumstances. So you see, accidentally breaking 3 cups is worse than intentionally breaking 1. So in the child's eyes, the punishment for the 3 cup offense should be greater. That is to say, in a classroom, someone accidentally, with a swipe of her hand, and 3 glasses are broken. Okay, versus another child. The child is a handsome devil. This child is saying, look at me. Would you do this? I'm going to break this glass. Let's take a look, just 1 glass. He picks up the glass high in the air and then drop it onto the floor. Okay, so this is the second child. Then the children in the class, they are asked, who should we should punish child A or B more. Okay, then the children, most of them will say, the one who breaks the one who broke 3 glasses. Okay, because 3 glasses, the second one just one. Okay, so as children interact with others, they develop perspective, taking ability, and see that different people have different rules. Okay, now there is the gradual shift to a morality of cooperation. Children come to understand that people make rules and people can change them. So this is the first step in exiting the concrete operational stage. Okay, when rules are broken, both the damage caused and intention of the offender are taken into account. These developmental changes and others are reflected in in both Piaget and Lawrence Kober's theory of moral development based in part on Piaget's idea. Okay, now Piaget believed that moral knowledge changes as children mature, but did not see the changes as clearly related to specific ages or sequential. Okay. However, the current developmental model for understanding moral judgments rests primarily on a complex scheme of universal, invariant, and sequential stages that were described and elaborated by Lawrence Kober, our next topic. All right, but then let me continue with Kober. Over 2 decades, essentially from the time Kober began his doctoral dissertation in 1955. Okay? Colbert elaborated on Piaget's ideas. He postulated that the term moral referred to a judgment or way in which an individual engages in a decision-making process, a decision, how to act, how to behave. He viewed children as moral philosophers who develop standards on their own based on cognitive interactions with the environment. So, Colbert is more in line with Erikson. Remember Erikson's psychosocial development. So interactions are very important. Okay? Children derive rules, they derive understanding by interacting with adults, and of course interacting with peers as well. So Colbert claimed that one attains higher forms of morality by attaining higher levels of reasoning, and not by direct instruction in virtue. Okay? Direct instruction in morality. Okay? So children proceed through an invariant sequence movement from one stage of moral development to the next. Okay, so this kind of development involves an internal cognitive reorganization rather than the simple acquisition of moral concept prevalent in the culture. Okay, so that's what Lawrence Kober. Of course, he proposed stage theories of moral development. Okay, so but then he studied Piaget's ideas on all this here on morality. Okay, on all this here, and actually his interest in moral realism. Okay, say, remember breaking 3 glasses more serious than intentionally breaking 1. Right? That's Lawrence Kober. Okay, let's stop here, and we'll turn to Kober in our next video. All right.